Listen carefully. While you're busy playing by rules that no longer exist, someone else is moving you across their board like a piece they're willing to sacrifice. Machiavelli understood something that separates those who shape reality from those who merely react to it. The weak-minded are not victims of circumstance. They are resources. And right now, as you hear these words, you face a choice that will define whether you remain among the exploited or join those who understand the true architecture of influence. You believe the world operates on merit, fairness, reciprocity. This belief is precisely what makes you vulnerable. Every single day, you interact with individuals who have already been claimed by someone more strategic than you. That colleague who suddenly shifted their opinion. That friend who inexplicably turned against you. They didn't arrive at those positions through independent thought. Someone planted the seed, watered it with carefully chosen words, and harvested the outcome they desired. You were never fighting an individual. You were fighting against an invisible hand that had already positioned the pieces before you even entered the room. The cost of not understanding these mechanics is extracted from you in ways you don't even recognize. Opportunities that should have been yours. Credit for your ideas attributed to others. Relationships that could have elevated you, poisoned before they began. You think you're participating in a meritocracy, but you're actually funding someone else's empire with your ignorance. Every moment you refuse to acknowledge how influence actually operates, you volunteer yourself as raw material for those who do. Look around you. Identify the patterns. Who in your life makes decisions based purely on how they feel in the moment? Who requires constant reassurance? Whose mood shifts with the last person they spoke to? Who accepts information without verification? Who believes what they want to believe, rather than what evidence suggests? These are not character flaws to pity. These are exploitable vulnerabilities that others are already using. The only question is whether you'll remain blind to the game while others profit from your ignorance. The weak-minded reveal themselves through emotional volatility. Their responses are disproportionate, unpredictable, governed by internal storms they cannot navigate. This is not weakness to condemn. This is opportunity to recognize. When someone cannot regulate their emotional state, they become dependent on external sources of stability. Become that source, then you become their compass. They will turn to you not because they respect you, but because they need you. And need is far more powerful than respect. Watch how they seek validation. The weak-minded require constant confirmation that they matter, that their choices are correct, that they are valued. This hunger never satisfies because it originates from an internal void they cannot fill themselves. You can feed this hunger indefinitely, and they will never realize they're being kept deliberately starving. A well-timed compliment, a strategic acknowledgement, a carefully crafted affirmation. These cost you nothing, but deliver loyalty that logic could never command. Notice their thinking patterns, or rather the absence of them. The weak-minded do not analyze, they absorb. They do not question, they accept. They mistake repetition for truth and emotion for evidence. Tell them something 3 times with conviction, and it becomes their reality. They will defend your implanted ideas more vigorously than you would yourself, because they now believe these thoughts originated in their own mind. This is not manipulation. This is simply understanding how most minds actually function. Now understand the illusion of choice. You never give the weak-minded open-ended decisions. You present them with options you have already selected, paths that all lead to your desired destination. Do you want to meet Tuesday or Thursday? Both serve your schedule. Should we approach this with strategy A or strategy B? Both advance your agenda. The weak-minded feel empowered by choosing, never recognizing that the choice itself was the cage. Frame these options in their emotional language. Do not appeal to logic with those who do not value it. Speak to their fears, their desires, their need to feel significant. Make the choice you want them to make feel like the choice that validates who they believe themselves to be. Then the critical element. Make them believe it was their idea. The weak-minded will resist what they perceive as external control, but they will champion what they believe they discovered themselves. Plant the seed indirectly. Mention it casually. Let them stumble upon it. Express mild skepticism so they feel compelled to convince you. Then watch as they adopt your position with the fervor of original thought. They will credit themselves for the insight. Let them. Your goal is not recognition. Your goal is outcome. Emotional dependency is your foundation. The weak-minded are already dependent on something, someone, some source of certainty in a world that terrifies them with its complexity. They will attach to whoever provides the strongest anchor, become their source of stability, their interpreter of confusion, their guide through uncertainty, but never provide constant reassurance. Use intermittent reinforcement. Alternate between validation and withdrawal. This creates addiction far more powerful than consistent support ever could. They will work endlessly to regain your approval, never realizing you engineered both its presence and absence. You now know what others refuse to see. You now know what others refuse to see. The machinery of manipulation runs on principles so simple, so elegant, that once understood they cannot be unseen. But we've only scratched the surface. The first 3 laws gave you the foundation. What comes next separates the amateur from the master. These advanced principles require surgical precision, absolute emotional detachment, and the willingness to orchestrate reality itself. The mirror technique is where most fail because they confuse it with genuine empathy. Listen carefully. You are not becoming like them. You are creating a reflection so precise that they see themselves in you and mistake this for connection. Study their language patterns, their values, their tribal identifiers. When they speak of family, you speak of family. When they champion a cause, you champion that cause. But here's the critical distinction. You adopt the surface markers while remaining internally unmoved. They talk about justice. You discuss justice using their exact phrasing, their emotional cadence, their moral framework. You become a mirror that shows them their ideal self. This creates a bond far deeper than friendship. It creates recognition. They believe you are them, only slightly better, slightly more articulate, slightly more successful. This false kinship bypasses every rational defense they might possess. They trust mirrors because mirrors don't threaten. They validate, and in that validation, you gain access to their decision-making process, their fears, their ambitions. You become the voice in their head that sounds like their own thoughts. The weak-minded desperately seek their tribe. They need to belong to something larger than themselves because they lack internal cohesion. Exploit this mercilessly. Use the symbols, the rhetoric, the shared enemies of whatever group they identify with. You don't need to believe any of it. You simply need to speak it fluently enough that they grant you insider status. Once inside their psychological tribe, your suggestions carry the weight of group consensus. You are no longer an outsider proposing ideas. You are one of them, simply articulating what the tribe already knows to be true. Now we move to information control. The weak-minded do not seek truth. They seek comfort. They want someone to explain the chaos, to provide narrative structure to random events, to tell them what everything means. Become that interpreter. Feed them partial truths, information fragments that require your analysis to become coherent. Present yourself as the one who sees patterns they cannot. Here's the mechanism. Give them 60% of a story, the parts that confirm their existing biases and fears. Then position yourself as the only source for the remaining 40%. They will return to you again and again, dependent on your interpretation to complete their understanding. You control the frame through which they view reality. Strategic ambiguity is your weapon here. Never be completely clear. Use language that sounds profound but requires their engagement to extract meaning. When they ask you to clarify, provide answers that spawn new questions. This serves 2 functions. First, it prevents them from ever fully grasping your position, which means they cannot argue against it or see its flaws. Second, it creates the illusion of depth. The weak-minded confuse complexity with wisdom. They interpret your ambiguity as evidence of sophisticated thinking rather than deliberate obfuscation. And most critically, ambiguity maintains your leverage. The moment you become completely transparent, you lose the mystery that keeps them engaged. Always leave them wanting more clarity, more access, more of your supposedly superior understanding. Write in the comments what you've observed about information dependency in your own circles. Who controls the narrative around you? Who do people turn to for interpretation of events? Understanding this reveals the existing power structure you must either join or dismantle. The manufactured crisis is perhaps the most potent tool in your arsenal, and the most dangerous if mishandled. Here's the principle. People bond with their saviors far more intensely than with casual acquaintances. But you cannot be a savior without a crisis, so you create one. Not obviously, never directly. You identify their existing anxieties, their latent fears, and you amplify them. Someone worried about their career, you casually mention industry trends that should concern them. Someone anxious about relationships, you point out behavioral patterns in their partner they hadn't noticed. You're not inventing the fear. You're cultivating what's already there, feeding it, helping it grow until it becomes urgent. And then, only then, do you offer the solution. You provide the framework for understanding the crisis. You offer the strategy for managing it. You become indispensable because you're the only one who truly understands their danger and knows the way out. This exploits the savior complex that exists in the weak-minded from both directions. They want to be saved, and they want to worship the one who saves them. Give them both. But here's the sophisticated part. Never completely resolve the crisis. Provide relief, provide progress, provide hope, but maintain a low level of anxiety that keeps them returning. The crisis must become chronic, manageable, only through your continued involvement. This transforms temporary gratitude into permanent dependence. You must understand the psychology of crisis bonding. Trauma creates attachment. Shared adversity generates loyalty. When you guide someone through what they perceive as existential threat, they don't just appreciate you, they incorporate you into their survival strategy. You become psychologically load-bearing. Removing you feels dangerous because you're associated with their safety. This is why hostages sometimes bond with captors, why abuse victims return to abusers, why cult members defend their leaders. The weak-minded cannot distinguish between the source of their fear and the source of their relief when both come from the same origin. Use this. But never, and I cannot stress this enough, never become dependent on the weak-minded yourself. This is where ambitious manipulators destroy themselves. They build empires on pawns and then cannot function without those specific pawns. Emotional attachment is poison. Practical dependency is suicide. For every role, every function, every position in your network, maintain multiple options. The weak-minded individual is replaceable. Their function is not. The moment you need a specific person rather than the role they fill, you've given them power over you. They may not be sophisticated enough to recognize or exploit this power, but it exists nonetheless, and it makes you vulnerable. Maintain exit strategies before attachment forms. This requires constant vigilance against your own psychology. Humans are tribal creatures. We bond, we attach, we develop loyalty. These impulses will betray you if left unchecked. Treat relationships with the weak-minded as temporary arrangements with indefinite timelines. Appreciate their utility without treasuring their presence. The moment you catch yourself thinking someone is irreplaceable, begin developing their replacement. This isn't cruelty. This is structural integrity. Your power cannot rest on foundations that might crumble. Disposability awareness extends to knowing when to cut losses. The weak-minded can become liabilities. They can grow suspicious, resentful, or simply outlive their usefulness. When this happens, you must be capable of immediate, complete severance. No guilt, no hesitation, no sentimental attachment to past utility. What they provided yesterday is irrelevant to what they cost today. Calculate coldly, act decisively. You now possess knowledge that most will never acquire, not because it's hidden but because they lack the stomach to internalize it. You see the machinery. You understand the mechanics. You recognize that human behavior follows patterns as predictable as physics, and those patterns can be exploited by anyone willing to study them without moral squeamishness. This knowledge separates you from the unconscious masses who stumble through social dynamics, sometimes winning, often losing, never understanding why. Nature built hierarchies into every social species: dominance and submission, leader and follower, predator and prey. These aren't social constructs. They're biological realities. You can pretend they don't exist, you can refuse to participate consciously, but the hierarchy operates whether you acknowledge it or not. The only question is which position you occupy. Ignorance doesn't grant you immunity. It simply ensures you occupy the bottom. You've graduated from unconscious pawn to conscious player. That transition is irreversible.